Artwork, critiques, Photoshop files, and reference sheets are all available on my Patreon. And save the date, guys, as Draw with Mikey episode 100 will be live on YouTube on Saturday the 22nd of September. Well, hello there guys and girls, I hope you're all doing well. My name's Mikey and welcome along for another tutorial. Today we are in Photoshop and you guys have been asking me a lot for digital colouring in tutorials. Thank you very much for all of that feedback. Today we're going to be keeping it super simple and basic because I don't want to in any one tutorial give you too much to overload you. So today we're going to be focusing on that clean anime style that I like to do and basically how to colour in the skin tones and the shadows of your anime and manga characters. So if you want to follow along with Photoshop at home or use any digital software that you might have, we're gonna keep things simple, and bear in mind I will hopefully be doing some reviews of other drawing software further down the line. Now, the basic way I like to start with any picture is to go to File New and use an A3 sheet of paper, so that's 420mm by 297, just like over here, and keep the resolution at 300 pixels per inch. I won't go too much into the details of that, but those are the settings I like to have. Then the very first thing you always want to do whenever you've got a new digital sheet of paper in front of you is go and create a new layer. So right down here we've got this little new icon, and boom, that puts a layer sitting above our page so that any line work we do is completely separate. Now I'm actually going to just dive straight in, guys, and start to draw a very simple head shape, simply because, and you're probably going to hear loads of scratching because I've got the microphone right by the screen, simply because I've talked many times before about how to draw heads in anime and manga and other figures and bodies, and we're really going to just skip our way straight over to the colouring part, nice and simple. So for you guys at home, if you want to pause this section of the video whilst you're actually just building up the face for your own characters, that's totally fine, and then we'll dive back in once everybody's ready to actually get these girls' faces coloured in. But I'm just going to have a very simple bit of head construction up here, and you will notice that on this layer, for my construction lines, I'm using red. Basically, guys, when you're doing your construction, go ahead and use any nice bright colour that you can, as long as it's not black and as long as it's not a very dark grey. And what that will do for you is basically help you later on distinguish separately these construction lines from your final lines that you might be using later. That way you'll know completely separately what's going on with any one given bit. So I'm going to give this character just a pair of shoulders, I think, probably nothing more. I'll just sweep down here, basically making it a bit like a bust that you get for famous ancient people in your library of your local college and so on. So let's just sweep down some shoulder shapes here like so, and then collarbone in there. And again, super simple like that. And then I'm just going to, underneath the head of our brow line, just maybe get in a zone that's going to be an eye here, some kind of almond shape, and then another eye under our brow line around about here for our character as well. And then maybe we've got just an eyebrow line up here. And again, I'm kind of just making this up on the cuff. The main focus is going to be in just a second, guys. So I'm keeping this really quick so we can actually talk about the colouring stage. But I do want to start from scratch so that you guys can all have a go at home and kind of, you know, keep pace when it comes to actually getting these characters down. So let's just lower that nose just a little bit to down here. We're going to do such a pug-nosed younger character this time. Cheeky bit of smile. Why not? Eyes looking at us, the viewer. Why the juice not like so? And then I'm going to have an ear just over here. And again, I'm going to really focus on keeping this simple, guys. So this is a great opportunity for me to say, whilst we get these very basic bits out of the way, that for this tutorial, I'm going to show you the real basics of colouring in the skin tones. I'm going to talk through a lot of the simple stuff. And then what we can do in the future is have another tutorial. If this one's going to be our beginner, we can go ahead in the future and have a slightly more intermediate or advanced tutorial where I'm actually going to share a lot of the little tricks and highlights and things you can do with skin tones when you're kind of making things look a little bit slicker and sweeter. And then maybe after that, who knows, we'll do hair and all sorts of other bits. Just get yourself in the comment section. Let me know what you would like to see. Now, I'm not going to be focusing on the hair for the sake of this tutorial, but I will just give this character some hair, you know, for the sake of a thumbnail and so on, when we wrap up at the end. So if you've already got just the face down, or maybe guys, you've already drawn your own character at home, you've got them on a sheet of paper somewhere and you want to import them into your computer and separate the line art layer, well, I have done some very quick instructional videos for both of those, getting your artwork onto your computer and separating your line art onto its own layer if you're actually scanning things in from paper into digital. So follow along with any of those. Hopefully up on the screen I've got a link to the entire tutorials playlist, but today we are going to focus on this skin. So there we go. I've got the hair just going back and around like that. Maybe it's tied up somewhere, which is why it follows that knotted flow, some kind of top, and I think we're good to go and actually work on those final lines. So because I've got these constructions in red, my final line art layer is going to be on a new layer again. So down here, make a new layer, or bear in mind, I can go to layer up here and new layer and leave it on normal if I was going to click OK, but I'm just going to delete out that excess one there. There's just two different ways to do it. And I'm going to go not quite to black, even though I like to keep my final construction lines really, really dark, guys. I'm actually going to go for a super dark red that almost looks black. I could do the same with purple. Anything that looks almost black, tend to keep it on the warmer range instead of your darker sort of blues and greens. But by doing this later on, we're going to do a little trick with our line art. One of the final things I'll show you, a really simple thing that will really give your artwork some pump and pop. But for now, just know it might as well be black, but really, it's really, really dark, really, really saturated red. I'm all the way down on the bottom right-hand side of my slider. And let's just recap what's going on with the quality of my pen. What nib am I using in digital art? Well, I have a range of brushes. Do not worry about all of them. I'm using actually the simple air brushes that you get in Photoshop anyway, but I've just preset some down here. So what I've got here is just an airbrush. It's halfway between roughly hard and soft, and it's 12 pixels in size. So that's what I've been using for this construction, and that's what I'm also going to stick with for the sake of our final lines, because I'm going to stroke them in a little bit to kind of get that final weight. So anyway, I'm on my other layer. So I can see that on layer 1 here, if I turn this on and off, that's where we've got our main construction, and layer 2 is where I'm going to be popping our fine line. So let's zoom in a little bit and just start around about the eyes. That's usually the best place to go. Now, the big bit about the eyes is once you start to get them in as a final thing is you can map out the lashes and the different shapes. But because that is, again, not the focus, what I'm going to do is just time lapse this little section, get my final construction lines on everything. So you might want to pause the video, guys, whilst you're doing the same at home, just so that this video itself isn't super long and we can get straight to colouring in those skin tones. So I will see you in just a sec. Okay, great guys, so we're all set with our line work and we're ready to actually get colouring in. I guess this is where the tutorial actually begins. Now, when it comes to doing in the colour for your characters, the first thing I suggest is come away from a white background. I'm going to be on my background layer, but I'm actually going to have this neutral grey tone instead that I'm going to fill in. And the reason why I like to go for a grey for these particular examples is because when it gets to the colour, I'm going to understand how bright or dark the colour is compared to a kind of neutral background. When you put a colour next to black, the colour looks brighter. And when you put a colour next to white, the colour looks darker. It's just how your eyes work. Plus, it reduces the amount of glare. So win-win. Anyway, what I like to do is, on a new layer, start off with a base for our skin tones. So I'm going to go ahead and grab up our colour picker. And what I like to do for vaguely white anime characters is to go into kind of this orangey part of the spectrum. Orange kind of towards the reddish pinkish tones. And then basically about 1/3 into the saturation, so up and down kind of this area here is where I might pick a relatively light skin tone, something like this. Let's go a little bit closer to white, and I'm just going to paint bucket that in for the entire layer. And because on our line art layer at the top we've got everything closed in, you can see that I've filled the gap here so that I've got a solid outline everywhere. I can just use the magic wand tool to select everything on the outside. Then I can go to select, then modify, then expand by, say, 2 pixels, okay? And all that's doing really is just my selection lines are going in and underneath a little bit my black lines as well, just tightens everything up, but then going to go to that skin pigment layer and delete everything which I don't need, just like so. So now I've got this kind of base layer here, which just fills up the mass or the volume of my character, and I get to paint everything on top. So with that in mind, I'm going to go to a layer on top straight away, and I'm going to just start to think about these kind of lighter and darker areas to a character in the widest, softest way possible. So I'm going to go for a very light tone up here, just starting off with our base color again and going lighter, and I'm going to take our base color, which is vaguely around about here, and go a bit darker towards the reds as well, bringing this selection tool slightly further to the right, a little bit lower down, just to get things a touch more saturated like so. And with these 2 different color tones here, what you can do is you can grab your paint bucket tool again, leave it onto gradient tool, and make sure that gradient's just a kind of A to B. So you can see up here I've got this dark pink to soft white light, and I can just actually apply that on my new layer like so. I think that's going to work out for me, and I'm just going to expand the range of that because it's quite a difference. But what that does for me is basically tell me that the area near the top of our character is a little bit lighter and the area at the bottom is a little bit darker. But I only want these tones to show up on that skin layer. So where I've got this, I'm going to lock it or make it a clipping mask to the layer below. So I'm going to right click, create clipping mask, and boom, again, everything that I do on these clipping mask layers is only going to show up in the zone where we've actually got our base skin tone. So now what I can start to do is pick around this picture with a super soft airbrush. So I'm going to just grab this one here that I've made, but basically Photoshop basic airbrush again, 0 hardness, and I'm going to make the size really, really big. Something like so, about 1000 pixels to do the trick. And I'm going to make sure that the mode is on normal. Don't know why it went to pin light there. And on the opacity, I'm going to lower that to about 30%. And I'm just going to color pick this really light zone here. And I'm just going to really softly put in a little bit of a blend around here, just to bring, say, the shoulders a bit more further forward. Under the chin's going to be certainly really dark, so I'm going to color pick down here. And by the way, when you've got your paintbrush tool selected, you can use this dropper tool here to select a color that you want to make your chosen color to paint with. Or, whilst I've got the paintbrush out, I can just hold Alt, the Alt key, and that will drop it into the paint tool or the paint picker, and then shift back, and now I've got that color selected. And I'm using the darker tones just up here, just to show that where the hair falls over the face, that's going to sort of have a little bit more shadow and shading as well. So I've got some very vague things going on with these skin tones. Picking light again, just to lighten up the bottom part of the face around about here. Picking dark again, and getting the lasso selection tool, just to kind of creep round under here. Why the devil not? And get, again, with that really soft brush, just make sure things are a little bit darker under the neck like so. So that's kind of the first thing I do, is just some really, really soft shading areas. And then what I like to do is on a new layer again, which I'm also going to make sure is a clipping mask layer, just like so. I'm actually going to have a think now about the hard line shadows. So what I like to do is take those shadow tones towards those reds and browns. So on my color picker here, where I've got my color slider, I'm staying down here towards the bottom into this kind of reddish, brownish, yellowish zone. And I'm just dragging that color drop picker right over to the right hand side into something a bit darker and a bit more saturated, like so. And then this time around with my brush, I'm going to make sure it is a hard brush. So again, what I'm doing here is I've just got the hardness set to 100%. I've got the size of this particular example at 34 pixels. I've got a nice hard edge, and I'm going to get this opacity and put it back up to 100%. So that any brush stroke I do is going to have this full color. And then I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to just think about where the hard edges of shadows might be for a character. So you're going to start to get somewhere we've got the hair coming over the face. That's going to be a hard edged shadow. And this is all about painting in that cleaner, harder anime style, guys. We'll do a much more advanced tutorial in the future about the kind of more painterly techniques, as well as, like I said, a more intermediate tutorial about all of the different tips and tricks after the basic colouring in stage that you can get done. So you notice I'm just painting in and imagining where the shadows would be for this hair. And by the way guys, for this entire thing, go ahead and assume that the light source is going to be slightly vaguely over here, up in the top right, mostly going down. I'm going to do one light source for this character. I'm not going to mix too many things up or make it too complicated. So making sure I'm back on this layer with my shadows, and I'm just going to continue around the hairline firstly. And you'll notice that I'm making these shadow lines much thicker where there's denser shadow areas. So where there's loads of hair coming together, I'm going to do quite a fair bit of shading right down the outside edge of this part of the face. All of this is kind of in shadow because our light source is over towards us over on the right hand side. And I'm just going to imagine that follows the sweep of the jawline and the cheek down on this side. Maybe it's going to catch a little bit of the divot where the lips kind of just squeeze up into the cheek here. Maybe there's going to be a little bit of shadow around where the lips are kind of meeting up anyway, just to pull that forward. And constantly just thinking in this manner, where's my light source, what's catching it? So nice and simple, let's just go around the rest of the top of the hair, thinning things out as we drop down, and then keeping that nice and thick towards the top, thicker and then thinner. And as I thin out this shadow, it also indicates that the hair is maybe away from the face, and as the shadow gets very thin, maybe it's telling us that the hair is getting quite close to the surface area of the skin again. So there's very small distance there. Then similar up here, background down there, why not? On this edge in here, so maybe we're catching a little bit under there, catching a little bit under there as well. Just reshaping these as I see fit. And then we've got that whole area under the chin, so I'll come back to that in a second. Just inside of the earlobe here, we've got probably shadow up there, shadow up around the top inside edge, just in here, and just in there like so. And again, don't worry too much about these details guys, this is just where I tend to put things when we're doing the basics. Anytime you've got a shape or an area of the body, just make sure you've got a bit of cast shadow just underneath that edge, just where things tend to kind of disappear away from us like so. And then I'm going to get a nice strong neckline sweeping in there because the underside of the chin protrudes quite a distance out from the neck, so you can kind of sweep all of that into shadow as well relatively confidently. Then we've got some areas such as the hood of the eye, so I'm just going to put that hard shadow line, not too thick, but just indicate it in there. Let's just take that down just a little bit, and I hope you guys are keeping up if you're also doing a copy yourself. Again, don't be scared to pause at any point, and because I'm just kind of doing this live so to speak, I might just kind of ramble on a little bit, but hopefully we've got all of the salient points in here. You can kind of see what I'm trying to get at the moment. We're starting with hard shadows. We are going to do some soft ones in just a moment guys, don't you worry. And then we've got maybe just a little bit of the underside of the nose here, so that's going to cast a shadow down on the face. Maybe that's going up away from us behind the nose because it protrudes so far out on the face. That is casting a shadow right across onto the other part of the cheek, something like so. And then maybe I'm just going to get the underside of the eyes in like this, a little bit down towards the tear duct before I go and sweep over the top, just over here behind the lashes, down the front again, and just underneath like so, because remember that's a curved surface that's kind of pushing out away from the surface of the face. And then just a few bits down here, we might get a little bit of this area of the collarbone, just up here and just here. Don't worry too much about what I'm showing, just a little divot in the anatomy really. And then you can kind of have a few bits there and there. And of course maybe up on the inside edge here, we've got all sorts of shadow getting cast around this arm because the light source, as we said, was top right. All around the chest as well, just like so. And then if I just come down here and do a bit of a similar thing, just showing a little bit of shading in this area of the arm, but not too much by comparison if our light source is a bit more to the right again as mentioned. And then we've got the edge of the neck coming down here, and actually this is the really brave part. If you imagine all of this head up here and all of our lights kind of going from the top right, we're actually casting a great big shadow onto the overall part of our character around about here like this. So here's the point of our underside of the chin kind of getting mapped over to the face like so. I've got a few bits up there, then the neckline here. So I'm going to sweep this shadow actually up to there. I'm going to go ahead and actually just make this brush a bit bigger so it's a bit quicker, and I'm going to blotch all of this in. but we're also going to subtract a little bit from this just to make it a little bit less intrusive, but we're going to do that in a really quick second. Bear with me. About now. So guys, where we've got this big lovely cast shadow doing its thing, what we're actually going to do is go over to my eraser tool. I'm going to still make sure, just like a paintbrush, that that's a really soft, so 0 hardness eraser. I'm going to make the size nice and large, about 200 odd pixels. Drop the opacity down again to about 10%, seems good. And I'm just going to very lightly, because this cast shadow is very large but also quite far away, there's going to be loads of other ambient light kind of taking the edge off of that. So I'm going to very lightly just go over that shadow area. I'm just going to pull it back a bit. So I'm just erasing exactly how dark that is, just to allow for loads of other areas of light. Essentially just starting to get a bit of a blend into that one there. Take a little bit off the edge where it's underneath the neck, and I'm going to take a little bit off the edge underneath the nose as well, just to remove how much that kind of obtrudes. And I'm also going to do the same just to take the edge off the lower parts of where we've got the hair shadow, just to let them slip back a little bit as well. But other than that, that is all we need there. So the other part that I mentioned was soft brush. So I'm still on this shadow layer. I'm going back to my actual brush. I've still got things onto my hard one here, so I'm going to just drop to soft brush again, 0% hardness, about 34 pixels, so I'm going to make that a little bit larger, but just a little. And whilst I've still got this color tone now on my layer, I'm also going to soft brush in a few bits to really just smooth things out, such as on this part of the face, this kind of curve that we've got going down the side of the cheek. Well, that's actually kind of a smooth rolling curved surface away from us. So I'm going to indicate that by softening up all of this kind of edge down here. I'm also going to just put in a few softer bits where we've got the inside of kind of the brow and where the eye meets in there. So this is kind of a bit of a shaded area because it's a bit further into the head, around about this zone here as well. Working as softly as I can. In fact, I'm going to lower the opacity of this brush to about 42%. And I'm just going to get in a little bit down there like so. Sweep off over there. And then a little bit under the eyes again, just around here. Outside edge of the head where it's catching a bit of kind of shadow because it's coming quite close to where all the hairs are covering things. And a little bit of soft just up at the very top of the forehead, just to kind of show a bit of ambient shading from all these other bits in there. And then just a little bit around the mouth. Just here, and I do like to just very lightly put in a little bit of tone on the nose as well, but we're going to come back to that in just a moment, don't you worry. Then as for the rest of the body, you might want to put in a few soft areas in a few key places, but let's not worry too much about all of the other areas. If we focus on the face, we're going to get the most done in the shortest amount of time. I do appreciate this tutorial is probably going to be way longer than I ever want it to be, but that's just how things are around here. So guys, we've got our soft shadows, we've got our light shadows in. As for our skin tone that we've got here, I'm just going to drop this down a little bit, but I'm going to move my slider up a touch towards yellow, just so that these skin tones now have a kind of more, a less pink feel to them. And I'm going to use that soft brush still, probably onto a new layer on top of everything that we're working so far. Oh, it's gone right up there. Let's just put it down here and make sure it is also clipped. And now I'm just going to work in this kind of slightly more even skin tone. And I'm going to use this to push back some of the shadows over on the left here. You see how that tone just kind of really just draws that out. And because it's slightly less pink to brown like we've been working and a little bit more yellow, it's starting to just put some different colors into our character. And that's also really important. You don't want things to look too flat, too dead and too grey. So getting in like yellows as well as your reds, and we're also going to go a little bit deeper in just a moment, is really just going to help bring things to life. I'm not going to take this all too far, guys, because this is our simple colouring in tutorial. I will bear that in mind. But I'm just getting in this more neutral skin tone now, just to flatten these kind of rough areas out. Still leave a few bits peeking round. But if I just get that yellow near the edge of that shadow there, and I'm saying yellow a lot, but we are just talking about a skin tone that's mildly slightly more towards the yellow end of the spectrum. Let's catch a whole load of light around here and up on this side here. And then just over here on that part and up on that edge there. And again, now our character is slightly to look just a little bit more alive again. However, now that we've gone a little bit higher, a little bit lower, what I recommend is going a little bit higher and a little bit lower once more. So where we've got our shadow in, we're going to push that back just a tiny bit more, and we're going to do it even deeper towards the reds of the spectrum. So now that I've got my slider down towards some kind of darker reds, I'm going to go right down here so that I'm getting something really nice and dark. But do bear in mind, I've got my brush still set at only 42%, really soft, low opacity, and I'm just going to, in the deepest parts of the shadows, just suggest even deeper red tones, just in there, just right up in there, tiny bit in here, and just on the edge there, a little tiny bit just under that nose there, again just tiny bits in that divot there, up by here, ear hole, just under the chin, only the darkest areas. Am I giving this a really light touch, everybody? And then maybe just down kind of the far sides there. And you can see these reds, this really dark saturated red, start to come through in the shadows. And again, it's keeping everything alive. When you're shading and highlighting your skin tones, you want to keep those richnesses in with the color, if you can, to keep life in your characters and their tones. Let's just do a tiny sweep up there. And then really similar thing when I'm talking about kind of going light on the lighter bits. Now, if we go back over to our lighter skin tones, what I'm actually going to do is just put a tiny bit of blush on our characters before we go to the lightest part. And that can be done by going up to your reds, just taking that over to a little bit of pink. Again, we're still using our really soft brush. And now what I'm going to do, and this is what I was talking about the nose, guys, is I do like to put a tiny bit of pink into the nose of our characters, just a little bit there, a little bit on the edge of the ears, almost as if they've just been out in the cold for too long. I don't know why, but it really just adds a bit of charm for me. And maybe they're blushing, maybe they're not, but I am going to put a tiny bit of pink right up into the tops of the cheeks here, just on the outside edge there, and right up into that top corner, a little bit of pink up there as well. Okay, so if we do just pick from our lighter skin tone area here, I am actually going to take that a little bit closer over to kind of the whites and yellows again. So I'm moving my slider up towards yellow a little bit further, and I'm moving my selection right over, not pure white at all, but right up towards that whitish yellowish tone. And then I'm going to lower the size of my soft brush, just so that I'm going to get a little bit of a kind of a harder edge. It's still the soft brush, but kind of a finer detail. And I can start to do things like go up into the eye area and just push a little bit of this back where you get, say, the highlight on your characters. If you see girls with makeup where you get this really bright area where the eyes just kind of flatten out to our viewpoint, our perspective, and just start to reflect a nice bit of light out towards us. So I'm just going to sneak that in there and here for us, get those lighter bits in. Then you can do the same for where underneath the eye kind of spans out towards us as its flatter edge. If I'm imagining this as a curve, the kind of flattest edge towards us is right down here. So I'm just going to highlight maybe that surface there as well. And these are the kind of final things that really just pull it forward. I can go up over this ear and just highlight a little bit up there and up there, especially closest to where it's in shadow to really get the contrast. And then really similar right up here, not the shadows but the skin. I'm just gonna increase that contrast by throwing in those slightly lighter moments right up in there, up in here, over the top of the brow, just inside the top part of the eyelid perhaps, just on there and just on there. And then we can just do a little bit that might just run over the top of the nose, just like there. Obviously it's a ridged point over the top of everything. Maybe we can go in and put a little dot over here for a reflection area on the nose as well and sweep that back, but we're going to reinforce that in just a moment. And maybe I just want to think about doing something by the edge of the nose up here, just to indicate what might be where a nostril zone is, and just let that fade out by using a fairly large few quick strokes. And other than that, I'm vaguely happy for our vaguely simple design on the skin tones. Now if I go really large, I can just start to say, right, well that lightened edge is catching loads of light here on the right, loads of that's coming over the traps here right over the shoulders, right down on this side as well. So let's make all of that lighter, because again I'm imagining that light source being in the top right. Things that are closer to your light source are going to be naturally lighter, things are further away are going to be naturally darker, and that's not even covering all of our shadows and bits like we've got here. And once I've got all of those basics out of the way, I'm just going to do another couple of bits, guys. I'm on a new layer, going to drop into some time lapse really quickly, just to fill in a little bit about the basic eyes and a little bit about the basic hair. But then I'm going to come back and we're going to do two final awesome things to really nail down our simple skin tones. Okay guys, so great, welcome back again. I've done some really simple basic hair, just coloured in the eyes really simply, and obviously done the brows and the lashes. But what we've now got ourselves is a basic character with some lovely but otherwise simple skin colouring designs. And now I just want to share with you guys kind of the main two things that really give it that final pop. Now firstly, this is a trick that we're going to be doing with our line art layer. So this layer here, the one that we've got all of our lines on that we worked earlier, I'm actually going to duplicate this layer onto another copy, and this duplicated version, you can see now that it's kind of doubled down and made everything really dark and black. But the reason why we've used a really dark red instead of a pure black for this, even though it does look quite black from this perspective, is because it allows us to do this. So what we're going to do with this selected layer is go up to filter, then we're going to go over to blur, then lens blur down here, and I'm going to keep that radius nice and high, somewhere about 43 on this slider. Might just drop it down a little bit to about, let's say, 33-ish, and then click OK. And what that's going to do is obviously blur really hard our line here. And now that we've got this blurry version of our line sitting on top, we're going to go back over to this layer and we're going to change it from normal and we're going to change it to color burn. Lovely. And then what you've got is all of a sudden those darks really dive in and give each other a lot more pop on this image. And I'm going to take this slider and show you none of that layer, and then what happens when we've got that color burn on top. Can you guys see that difference from relatively flat looking and fine to all of a sudden having a load of pop to it? Now this is actually too much, so I'm actually going to just leave it at about, let's say, around about 50% opacity. If I go all the way, it does get a little bit too over concentrated, but around about 50% odd, for me personally, works quite nicely. It still means that we've got all of our details, none of that gets lost, but we've also got that extra bit of push for our line weight. And the other thing, as well as that, is to get our white highlighted areas. So now that we've done that trick with the line layer, guys, go on to a new layer above all of our line art layers and everything else. Go over and get yourself pure white itself, and do that with a hard brush. So I've got here maximum hardness, size 34, and with this rock solid white, this is going to be our kind of our ultimate highlight layer. So what I might do is just pick out a few areas over the hair firstly, just like this. Oh, let's just change that shape a little bit, just like this, and follow a line curve that goes up here, and just to dot a few bits of where the light is getting caught right across this hairline, just like so. A few bits here, just kind of following a bit of a curve. I might just get rid of, I'm just going to make sure our eraser tool is on 100%. I'm just going to get rid of a few of those ones and just decide again exactly where I'm going to punch in that white. Maybe this one's just going to go there and just one dot there. Zoom out a bit and see how that catches, and then just continue that round. So over where we've got a highlight for this nose here, I'm going to have a little bit of white right along that top edge there, and just the tiniest line in there. And then I'm going to have a lovely bit of white right over the eye, cutting into all of that color to show where that reflects there and there. And then we can put in a few more dots around by the eyes, really get them to sparkle up if you want them to. You can do all sorts of things really, the sky's the limit. I like a tiny touch just over the tops of the cheeks as well, just to show where they're kind of pronounced and catching the light. And you can have a little bit sort of on the lip of your character, depending on how much lip you've actually given that character, a little bit around the tips of the ears. And if we just scroll out a little bit, I might just get a touch of a top over there where we've got the collarbones kind of popping out and doing their thing, and maybe there's going to be a little bit of light and stuff reflecting here. And I'm going to do a larger area by actually getting our lasso tool, and I'm going to map a selection which follows the curve of the shoulder. So we go down like this, and maybe we go up and back in like that. And then instead of using our hard white light, I'm going to use the soft brush again instead, 0 hardness, and really gently, really large brush as well, just stroke a little bit of that in from the top and let it fade out away. So when we get rid of that selection tool, we've got a bit of white up here, just kind of glistening and catching its own situation. And then we can start to do the same if we wanted to for things like around about the muscle here of the neck, just a tiny bit of a stroke in, remove that selection tool, and it just shows where we're highlighting a few bits there. So that's kind of a final bit that really gives it that bit of extra edge and pop, or I like to think so when it comes to those character designs. I think I'm going to just maybe come away from that white stripe there and just continue on a theme with just catching a few areas of highlight by going back to our hard brush, of course, and just popping in the odd dot there and then just get a few lines over to show that that's all joining up. There we go. Much happier with how that looks. Okay guys, so I really do hope that you found this basic skin coloring tutorial to be of some use for you for your own manga and anime characters at home. Obviously the main bits to talk about were that with your tones, do make sure that you start off not going too hyper saturated down the right, but pick something fairly even and neutral from the middle or slightly over to the left of your color picker. Obviously we've talked about having an overall skin zone right down here on your layers, which is your selection mask, and everything kind of fits on top, which is really important. And also basically have a good understanding of where you might want to put some hard edge shadows and where you might want to either delete that away to make it a bit softer or use a softer brush overall to kind of pull things back or push things forward. Other than that, of course, there's a few cool tricks you can do with some line layers and get your highlight white layer on top of everything to give things a bit of a gloss and a bit of a pop. So guys, if you haven't already, make sure that you've hit that subscribe and like button because those things really help me out, but also because it means you guys will get notified if we're doing some more tutorials in the future. As mentioned, I do plan to do another separate advanced coloring skin tutorial and some slightly different things for basic hair versus advanced hair and all sorts of other stuff in the future, so do not hesitate to get yourself into the comment section below and let me know what you guys want to see. And guys, if you do like the fact that I make drawing tutorials for free on YouTube, because I certainly do, bear in mind the only reason I'm able to do this is because there's a load of awesome people on Patreon who get loads of cool rewards and access to other things that make all of this possible. So a great big shout out to Antoine M, Nyan, Mohammed T.A, Divas Charms, Brandon W, Gerard, Breton F, Blooper Do, Plaguerish, Anthony C, H Caution, NASA A, Claytus, Redneck, Shakes Apprentice, Admiral Okmar, A Whisper to a Roar, Avarice, Panda Boy, Mark W, Carlos R, Lane D, Chibanobi, Sambia M, Sergio H, Purity Rain, Michael C, Brandon S, Dante Norm, Mr. Mooney, Some Weeb, Nezreen B, Joji, Daniel J, Elvin, Shisho, Michael S, Aaron B, Delivery Wolf, Jason W, Alex B, Zero, Demal Maximus, Cuddlebum, The Travelling Wolf, Ethereal, Joe R, Mad Duck, Garrett C, Ryder 2KX, Michael S, Trent H, Jorgen A, Luke C, Johnny T, Connor M, Julio Felix O, Rob, Kamari J, Jamie, Cache Commando, Mizzino, Grizzly, Mr. Turtle, Matthew G, Simon B, Gareth, Taylor S, Kenneth J H, Homongchi L, Angry Hermit, Johnny Y, Ollie, Garrett, Moral Muffin, Christian L, Tokiko K, Timothy B, Minion 715, Ken E, Wendell S, Sahaki, Fatness, Kurt D, Natasha G, and LMA Gamer. Thank you so much, you fantastic patrons on Patreon. You guys and many more are making all of this possible. Of course, there have been all of those changes to my Patreon, so do check things out, and these long lists I do promise will be a little bit shorter next month around. Of course, it really should be obvious, but always worth a mention. Your support means the world to me. Thank you so much, guys. And as for everybody else, I hope to see you soon with some more tutorials down the line. And just have a bloody lovely week. Take care.